The containment chamber aboard the Kathvar Imperial vessel was all angles and shadows, its walls a geometric puzzle of interlocking metallic plates that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The air carried a distinct ozone tang, punctuated by the rhythmic hum of energy fields. The chamber was designed to disorient and intimidate, with no obvious doors or windows, just seamless transitions between wall segments that could part without warning. Lieutenant Sam. Chatter, Reed struggled against his restraints. Feeling the cold bite of alien alloy against his wrists, his flight suit was torn in several places, revealing bruises that were beginning to bloom across his skin in vivid purples and yellows. Blood had dried in a small trickle from his left nostril, and his right eye was swelling shut. Yet despite his injuries, there was an unmistakable glint of defiance in his remaining good eye. "I've been in worse accommodation," Reed muttered to himself, tugging experimentally at the binding securing his arms behind his back. Though the service here leaves something to be desired. The year was 2479, and humanity had spent the past century spreading throughout their local star cluster, establishing a loose federation of colonies and outposts. It was an era of tentative expansion, marked by diplomatic tensions and resource competitions with at least 3 other spacefaring species. The Kathvar Empire, with its rigid military hierarchy and expansionist policies, had emerged as humanity's most significant adversary. Reed was a cargo pilot, tasked with transporting supplies between Earth's outer colonies. His ship, the persistent Talker, had been ambushed at the edge of disputed space, disabled with surgical precision, and boarded by Kathvar forces. The last thing he remembered before losing consciousness was the sight of armored figures breaching his airlock, their faceplates reflecting his own terrified expression. A seam in the wall before him suddenly parted, and 4 Kathvar soldiers entered. They were tall, easily 7 feet in height, with broad shoulders and thick limbs encased in segmented armor of a deep blue-black material. Their helmets were featureless, save for a single horizontal slit where eyes might be, glowing with an unsettling amber light. Each carried what Reed recognized as a plasma pulse rifle. All 4 weapons trained steadily on his chest. Behind the soldiers came a 5th figure, distinguished by elaborate scarification patterns visible on the exposed skin of its neck. The intricate raised welts formed a complex network of symbols, denoting rank and accomplishments in the Kathvar military hierarchy. This one wore no helmet, revealing a face that resembled a cross between a terrestrial reptile and an insect. Multiple compound eyes reflected the chamber's dim light, while mandible-like structures framed a mouth filled with serrated teeth. Human. The leader spoke, its voice a discordant combination of clicks and low-resonant tones processed through a translation device. "You will provide information on Federation defense protocols in Sector 7. Reed blinked his good eye, then did something that clearly caught the Kathvar off guard. He smiled broadly. "Well, hello to you too. I'm Lieutenant Samuel Reed, Federation Cargo Corps, Service Number 78, Delta 42 Echo 19. But everyone calls me Chatter. You know why they call me that? I talk. A lot. It's actually a bit of a problem sometimes. My commanding officer once timed me 17 minutes straight without taking a breath during a routine mission briefing. I broke the previous record by 4 minutes. Say, that's a lovely set of scars you've got there. Is that a rank insignia? I've always been fascinated by how different cultures signify hierarchical structures. On Earth, we went through a whole phase of shoulder pads and colored stripes, which was really just an evolution of earlier military traditions dating back to... The Kathvar commander's mandibles clicked rapidly in what might have been confusion or irritation. It raised a 3-fingered hand, silencing Reed momentarily. "You will provide tactical information or face neurological stimulation," it stated flatly. Reed's smile never faltered. "Neurological stimulation? Is that what you call torture these days? That's fascinating. We humans have quite a history with euphemisms for unpleasant things." Enhanced interrogation was a popular one for a while, but you know what's really interesting about human pain responses? We're actually capable of compartmentalizing discomfort through various psychological techniques. Some ancient Earth cultures even developed it into an art form. Take the Stoics, for example. The commander nodded to one of the guards, who stepped forward and struck Reed across the face with the butt of its weapon. The blow snapped his head to the side, and fresh blood spattered on the metallic floor. Reed spat out a mouthful of blood and worked his jaw back and forth. That's more direct than neurological stimulation, I'll give you that. But you know, physical violence as an interrogation technique has been extensively studied by human psychologists, and it's generally considered ineffective. The subject becomes focused on the pain rather than retrieval of accurate information, leading to false confessions just to make the pain stop. If you're looking for reliable intelligence, you might want to reconsider your approach. One of the guards shifted uncomfortably, its armored plates clicking as it glanced toward its commander. Reed noticed the subtle movement and pressed his advantage. "Oh, did they not brief you on human psychology before sending you in here? That seems like an oversight. We're a social species, you know. We process stress through verbalization. The more pressure you put on us, the more some of us talk. It's a coping mechanism. I'm particularly good at it, hence the nickname." The commander's compound eyes seemed to narrow, though it was hard to tell with their alien structure. It gestured to another guard, who produced a small device about the size of a human palm. The object hummed to life, emitting a soft blue glow. "This will extract what we need," the commander stated. "Conventional questioning is inefficient." Reed eyed the device with genuine curiosity. "Is that a neural scanner?" "We've been working on similar technology, though I suspect yours is more advanced. The ethical implications are fascinating, the boundary between memory extraction and thought violation. There's been quite a debate in Federation space about the morality of such devices. Some argue that memories are a fundamental aspect of personhood, and therefore involuntary extraction constitutes a form of identity theft. Others maintain that in matters of planetary security, such considerations must be secondary to. The guard pressed the device against Reed's temple, cutting him off mid-sentence as his body went rigid. His eyes widened, pupils dilating as the machine interfaced with his neural pathways. For a moment, the chamber was silent except for the soft hum of the device and Reed's suddenly labored breathing. Then, unexpectedly, Reed began to laugh. It started as a chuckle, then grew into a full-bodied laugh that echoed off the angular walls. "I'm sorry," he gasped between fits of laughter. "But that tickles. Is it supposed to tickle?" "Your facial expressions are hard to read, but I'm guessing that's not the intended effect. You know, human brains are notoriously complex. We still don't fully understand our own neural architecture. The interaction between memory, emotion, and conscious thought creates this fascinating feedback loop that makes straightforward extraction quite challenging. Have you accounted for the way human memories are contextualized through emotional states? Because that's a critical factor in." The commander snatched the device from the guard and examined it. Mandibles clicking rapidly in what seemed to be frustration, it barked an order in its native language. And the guard produced a second, larger device with a more ominous red glow. "This will cause pain," the commander stated bluntly. "Sustained neural firing in your pain receptors. You will provide access codes for Federation military channels." Reed's expression sobered slightly, but his voice remained steady. "Now we're getting to the more traditional approach. I appreciate the straightforwardness. But here's something you might not know about humans. We're extraordinarily adaptable. Pain is subjective and highly influenced by psychological factors. The same stimulus can produce vastly different experiences depending on context and mindset. For instance, marathon runners voluntarily endure physical distress that would be considered torture in other contexts. It's all about framing." The red device was pressed against his neck, and Reed's body convulsed as waves of agony coursed through him. His teeth clenched, tendons standing out in his neck as he fought against screaming. When the device was finally removed, he slumped forward, sweat dripping from his face onto the floor. "That's definitely unpleasant," he panted, voice ragged but still functioning. "But you know what's interesting about pain? It's impossible to remember accurately. Our brains simply don't store pain sensations with fidelity. Right now, I can tell you it was excruciating, but I can't actually re-experience the sensation. That's a neurological limitation, or perhaps a mercy, of human consciousness." The guard looked to the commander, clearly uncertain how to proceed with a prisoner who responded to torture with a lecture on neuroscience. The commander's scarification pattern seemed to pulse slightly as blood rushed to the surface of its skin, a sign of agitation in Kathvar physiology. "Bring the data destroyer," it ordered. 2 guards left the chamber, returning moments later with what appeared to be a small metallic sphere. They placed it on a pedestal that rose from the floor at the commander's gesture. "This device will systematically erase your neural patterns," the commander explained, a new edge to its translated voice. "It begins with recent memories, then proceeds to core personality structures. You will experience the dissolution of your identity before providing us with the information we require." Reed studied the sphere with genuine interest. Memory erasure technology? That's ethically complex territory. The relationship between memory and identity is one of the most fundamental questions in human philosophy, from John Locke to modern consciousness theorists. We've been debating whether continuity of memory is necessary for personal identity. If you erase my memories but leave my cognitive capacities intact, am I still the same person? It's the classic ship of Theseus problem applied to consciousness. The commander activated the sphere with a gesture. It began to emit a low-frequency pulse that made Reed's teeth ache and his vision blur. He felt a disturbing sensation of memories becoming slippery in his mind. Recent events sliding away like ice melting on a hot surface. "This is disorienting," he admitted, blinking rapidly. "But you know what's fascinating? Human memory isn't stored in a single location. It's distributed across neural networks. Episodic memories, semantic knowledge, procedural skills, they're all encoded differently. You might erase my recollection of breakfast this morning, but my knowledge of astrophysics or my ability to pilot a ship could remain intact. The compartmentalization of memory types is an evolutionary adaptation that—" "Enough," the commander barked, silencing the sphere with another gesture. "Your species' incessant vocalization is inefficient and irritating." Reed grinned, despite his obvious discomfort. "We call it conversation, and it's actually one of our most sophisticated adaptations. Humans are not the strongest, fastest, or most durable species on our planet, but we're exceptional at cooperation. Language facilitated that cooperation, allowing us to share information, coordinate actions, and build cultural knowledge that transcends individual lifespans. It's how we went from simple tool users to spacefaring civilization in a relatively short evolutionary time frame." While he spoke, Reed was subtly testing his restraints again, having noticed something interesting. Whenever the commander became agitated, the energy field containing him fluctuated slightly. The Kathvar technology, for all its advancement, seemed to be influenced by the emotional state of its operators, a weakness he might be able to exploit. The commander turned to one of the guards. "Activate recording protocols. The human's psychological responses must be documented for analysis." Reed's eyes flickered to a small device that emerged from the wall, clearly some kind of recording apparatus. This was an opportunity. If they were recording him, perhaps that signal could be accessed or intercepted. Every Federation officer received basic training in subspace communication frequencies, including how to modulate one's voice to embed coded patterns that might be detected by Alliance monitoring systems. "Recording me? I'm flattered, though I should warn you. I've been told I have a face for radio, as the old Earth saying goes. That means I'm better heard than seen." which is ironic given how much I enjoy talking. Did you know that human speech patterns carry substantial paralinguistic information? Tone, cadence, volume, they all convey meaning beyond the literal content of our words. It's a rich communication channel that written language often fails to capture fully. As he rambled, Reed began to subtly alter his speech patterns, embedding a rhythmic undertone to his words that would appear as meaningless vocal fluctuations to the Kathvar, but would register as an emergency location beacon on Federation communication systems. It was a long shot, but it was better than no shot at all. The commander appeared to lose patience. It gestured to the guards, and one stepped forward with yet another device, this one resembling a flexible metallic collar. "Neural dampener," the commander explained. "It will restrict your vocal capabilities while we proceed with information extraction." Reed eyed the collar with apprehension but didn't let his fear show. Fascinating technology. The neurological control required to selectively inhibit vocal function without affecting breathing or other autonomic processes must be incredibly precise. The human nervous system has approximately 100 billion neurons with roughly 100 trillion synaptic connections. Targeting specific neural pathways within that complex network is like finding a specific grain of sand on a beach. Have you accounted for individual neurological variations? Human brains exhibit significant plasticity and structural differences between individuals. As the guard approached with the collar, Reed increased the intensity of the coded pattern in his speech. Knowing this might be his last chance to transmit a signal, he also noticed that the guard, the same one who had shifted uncomfortably earlier, was moving with hesitation, its compound eyes darting between Reed and the commander. Reed decided to take a risk. "You," he addressed the guard directly, "with the damaged armor plate on your left shoulder, you've been in combat recently, haven't you? That's plasma scoring from a Federation phase rifle. Nasty weapons. Those designed to penetrate Kathvar battle armor specifically. Impressive that you survived." The guard froze, its hand halfway to Reed's neck with the collar. The commander hissed something in the Kathvar language, but Reed had struck a nerve. "I'm guessing you were at the Epsilon Meridian skirmish last month. That was a mess on both sides. Unnecessary deaths because of poor communication and misinterpreted intentions. Did you know that the Federation commander tried to send a stand-down signal 3 times before opening fire? Your communications officer either missed it or chose to ignore it. Tragic, really. So much could be avoided with better dialogue." The guard's hand trembled slightly, the collar wavering in its grasp. The commander barked another order, more forcefully this time, and the guard snapped back to attention, quickly securing the collar around Reed's neck. The device activated with a soft click, and Reed felt an immediate constriction in his throat, as if invisible hands were gently but firmly preventing his vocal cords from vibrating. He could still breathe, but speaking became impossible. The sensation was profoundly disturbing, a literal silencing that struck at the core of his self-identity as Chatter Reed. The commander's mandibles formed what might have been the Kathvar equivalent of a satisfied smile. "Now we will proceed efficiently." Reed, unable to speak, maintained eye contact with the commander, raising an eyebrow in what he hoped conveyed sardonic amusement rather than the panic he was beginning to feel. The neural dampener was more than physically restrictive. It created a psychological pressure unlike anything he'd experienced before. The inability to verbalize his thoughts made them seem louder, more chaotic in his mind. The commander approached, looming over Reed with its considerable height advantage. "The neural dampener allows two-way communication. I can permit you to respond to specific questions. All other vocalization remains suppressed." Reed nodded his understanding, still maintaining his defiant expression despite the increasing discomfort. "Federation defense protocols for Sector 7. Provide them now." The commander's voice had a new note of triumph. Reed felt the dampener's grip on his vocal cords loosen slightly, permitting limited speech. He cleared his throat experimentally. "Sector 7 protocols," he began, his voice raspy and strained. The commander leaned closer in anticipation. "Are classified under Federation Code 19 Alpha. But what's really interesting is how classification systems reflect power structures within organizations. The decision about who gets access to what information reveals underlying hierarchical assumptions and trust dynamics. In human military history, overclassification has often been as problematic as security breaches, creating operational inefficiencies and preventing necessary information sharing between departments." The commander stepped back, mandibles clicking rapidly in what was clearly frustration. It adjusted something on a control panel at its wrist, and the dampener tightened again. Cutting off Reed's speech mid-sentence about the historical parallels between information compartmentalization and ancient feudal power structures, "The human's psychological resilience is unexpected," the commander stated to a recording device embedded in its armor. "Conventional neural pressure appears ineffective. Recommend escalation to deep memory extraction despite risk of subject deterioration." While the commander was distracted with its recording, Reed noticed something crucial. The guard with the damaged armor, the one he had singled out earlier, was now stationed near the recording apparatus that had emerged from the wall. More importantly, the guard was making subtle adjustments to the device. Movements that seemed unnecessary for its operation. Reed's experienced eye recognized the telltale signs of someone establishing a covert transmission channel. Could it be possible? Was the guard actually relaying Reed's embedded location signal to an external receiver? It seemed improbable, but the guard's body language, a stillness that seemed forced, an attention too precisely focused on its task, suggested something beyond standard procedure. The commander turned its attention back to Reed. "Your resistance is futile and illogical. The information will be extracted. The only variable is how much of your neural architecture remains intact afterward." The dampener loosened again, allowing Reed to respond. "Logical from whose perspective?" Reed asked, his voice still strained, but stronger now. "Logic is culturally determined. You know, what seems perfectly rational within one conceptual framework might appear nonsensical in another." The anthropologist Mary Douglas wrote extensively about how notions of rationality are embedded within specific cultural contexts. From my perspective, sharing military information that would endanger my species is what's illogical. The commander's scarification patterns pulsed with increased blood flow, definitely an indication of agitation. "Your species is inefficient. You consume resources disproportionate to your productive output. Your expansion threatens established order. The Empire has determined that human presence in this sector is destabilizing and must be regulated." Reed raised his eyebrows. "Regulated? That's an interesting euphemism for what I'm guessing is planned extermination. But have you actually studied human societies in depth? We're remarkably adaptable and collaborative when given the chance. Our apparent inefficiency comes from our diversity of approach. We try many solutions simultaneously, which looks wasteful until you realize it's an excellent strategy for complex problem-solving in uncertain environments. It's evolutionary parallel processing." The commander moved to adjust the dampener again, but paused, appearing to reconsider. "Your persistent vocalization suggests a psychological need. Explain this compulsion." Reed nearly laughed at the unexpected question. "It's not a compulsion, it's communication. Humans are social animals. We think collectively, processing ideas through dialogue. Right now, I'm using speech to maintain my psychological integrity under stress. It's a coping mechanism, yes, but it's also how I'm evaluating my situation, considering possibilities, and maintaining my connection to my identity and values." "This is inefficient," the commander insisted. But there was a new note in its voice, something almost like curiosity. "Efficiency isn't everything," Reed countered. "Effectiveness matters more. Resilience matters more. Adaptation matters most of all. Human communication styles evolved not to be efficient, but to be robust under varying conditions. We repeat ourselves. We use metaphor and analogy. We frame and reframe concepts, all to ensure the core message gets through despite noise in the system. Before the commander could respond, an alarm suddenly blared throughout the chamber. Red emergency lighting replaced the previous dim illumination, casting harsh shadows across the angular surfaces. The commander's attention snapped to a communication device on its wrist, which was now projecting a holographic display filled with Kathvar symbols. Reed couldn't read the alien script, but the commander's reaction told him everything he needed to know. Its entire posture changed. Mandibles spread wide in what appeared to be shock or alarm. "Impossible," it hissed, abandoning the translation device and speaking in its native tongue, though Reed's universal translator implant still rendered the meaning. Federation vessels should not have been able to trace this location. The guard near the recording device, the one Reed had noticed making adjustments, suddenly moved, pressing a sequence of controls that caused the neural dampener around Reed's neck to deactivate with a soft click. The restraints binding his wrists also disengaged, though Reed kept his hands behind his back to avoid drawing attention to his newfound freedom. The commander was too distracted to notice, barking orders to the other guards who were now moving with urgent purpose, weapons raised as they took defensive positions around the chamber. The ship's internal communication system activated, filling the room with rapid Kathvar speech, reports of Federation vessels approaching in attack formation, warnings of imminent boarding actions. The guard who had freed Reed moved closer, using the chaos as cover. It spoke in a low voice, barely audible above the alarms. "The Empire underestimated your species' response capabilities. They will terminate you when they realize their tactical error." Reed nodded slightly, keeping his expression neutral to avoid giving away their interaction. "Why are you helping me?" he whispered. "I was at Epsilon Meridian," the guard replied simply. "I heard the stand-down signals. My commander ordered us to attack anyway. 217 of my clutchmates died unnecessarily." Reed absorbed this information with a grim nod. Internal dissent within the Kathvar ranks was unexpected but potentially valuable. "What's your name?" he asked. "We do not use names as you understand them." The guard responded. "My designation translates approximately to one who bears scars from fire. Your kind would find this cumbersome." "Scar it is." "Then," Reed decided with a faint smile, "thanks for the assist." Their whispered exchange was interrupted as the chamber's walls suddenly parted, revealing a different Kathvar officer. This one's scarification patterns were even more elaborate than the commander's, indicating superior rank. Behind this new arrival stood a smaller figure with a data pad, which Reed guessed was some kind of analyst or record keeper. "Commander Zalvrek," the new officer addressed the interrogator. "Explain how Federation forces have penetrated our defensive grid and located this vessel." Zalvrek, the commander, now named, straightened to attention. "The human prisoner has revealed nothing. High Commander, their vessels must have tracked the transport that captured him." The High Commander's compound eyes swiveled to fix on Reed, who was doing his best to look appropriately defeated despite his growing hope. "This does not explain how they penetrated our countermeasures. Our signal masking technology is superior to Federation detection capabilities." Reed decided to take a calculated risk. With the neural dampener deactivated and his hands secretly freed, he had options he hadn't possessed minutes earlier. More importantly, he now had information that the Federation forces outside would find valuable. "Perhaps I can shed some light on that situation," Reed offered, his voice strong and clear. All Kathvar eyes in the room turned to him in surprise. "Your signal masking technology is indeed impressive, but you made a critical error when you decided to record my interrogation." Zalvrek's mandibles clicked in alarm. "The dampener is malfunctioning." "No, it was deactivated," Reed corrected, standing up smoothly and bringing his hands around to his front, revealing his freed status. "You see, while you were so focused on what information you could extract from me, you failed to consider what information I might be feeding to your systems. The analyst with the data pad suddenly chirped an alarm, its smaller frame trembling as it examined readings on its screen. High Commander, the human speech patterns during recording contained embedded frequency modulations consistent with Federation emergency beacons. The High Commander turned to Zalvrek with a posture that needed no translation, pure fury. "You allowed this prisoner to broadcast our position?" Reed couldn't resist pushing his advantage. "Not just your position. Every word of our conversation was transmitted, including your detailed discussion of neural extraction technology, your assessment of human expansion as destabilizing, and your admission that the Empire has determined that humanity must be regulated, which, as we both know, is a euphemism for extermination." The room fell silent except for the continuing alarms. Reed met the High Commander's compound gaze steadily. "In other words," Reed continued, "you've provided the Federation with explicit confirmation of Kathvar hostile intent, details of your classified weapons technology, and evidence of war crimes through torture of a prisoner, all of which has been transmitted not just to the Federation vessels currently surrounding this ship, but to every major diplomatic channel in the sector." A new alarm joined the cacophony, this one with a different pitch and rhythm. The analyst checked its datapad again, mandibles trembling. "High Commander, Federation boarding crafts have attached at multiple points. Their encryption is unusual. We cannot block their entry protocols." Reed smiled. "That would be Captain Torres and the 7th Special Operations Division. They specialize in hostile extractions. Very thorough, extremely efficient. They're also transmitting everything they see directly to Federation headquarters and 3 other allied species command centers." The High Commander's scarification patterns pulsed violently as it processed this information. It turned to Zalvrek. "You have compromised Imperial security at the highest level. The human manipulated you into revealing strategic information. All I did was talk." Reed pointed out. "You chose to talk back, to record everything, and to underestimate humanity's capacity for turning communication into a weapon." Before the High Commander could respond, the chamber's wall exploded inward in a precisely controlled detonation. Through the swirling smoke and debris stepped a team of Federation soldiers in powered combat armor, weapons trained on the Kathvar personnel. Their helmets featured advanced targeting systems and full environmental seals, but the leader's faceplate was transparent, revealing a woman with dark eyes and a stern expression. "Lieutenant Reed," she called out, her voice amplified through external speakers. "Are you capable of movement?" "Captain Torres," Reed responded with a mock salute. "Never better, though I wouldn't mind a change of scenery." Torres nodded, then addressed the Kathvar. "By authority of the Federation Council and in accordance with the Proxima Treaty regarding treatment of prisoners of war, we are extracting our personnel. Any resistance will be met with appropriate force." The High Commander stood rigid, its compound eyes unreadable. "This vessel is sovereign Imperial territory. Your presence constitutes an act of war." "Funny thing about that," Torres replied coolly. "We have transmission records of your explicit intent to exterminate a Federation species, along with evidence of prohibited neural weaponry and torture of a properly identified military prisoner. The Federation Council has determined that these actions have already constituted multiple acts of war on your part." She gestured, and her team moved forward, creating a protective formation around Reed. 2 soldiers applied emergency medical treatment to his injuries while maintaining defensive positions. "However," Torres continued, "in the interest of preventing further escalation, we are prepared to resolve this particular incident diplomatically, if you're willing to engage in actual dialogue rather than monologues about human inefficiency." The High Commander's mandibles clicked rapidly as it communicated with someone through its personal device. After a tense moment, it responded. "The Empire will permit your extraction of this prisoner as a gesture of restraint. Further diplomatic communication will occur through established channels." Torres nodded. "Wise decision. Oh, and you should know, 3 other species representatives are waiting aboard my command vessel. They're quite interested in discussing your assessment of which species deserve to exist in this sector. Reed couldn't help himself. The Arcturians are particularly sensitive about extinction rhetoric, having nearly experienced it themselves during the collapse. And the Nator consider interspecies dialogue to be a sacred activity. They have some fascinating philosophical frameworks around communication as a spiritual practice. The High Commander's posture shifted subtly, a gesture that Reed interpreted as resignation mixed with dawning comprehension. The Federation has formed new alliances. Not new, Reed corrected as a medic applied regenerative foam to his facial injuries. Existing relationships strengthened through communication, mutual understanding, and respect for different evolutionary approaches. You know, all those inefficient social behaviors you were criticizing earlier. Torres gave Reed a look that clearly said, "Stop antagonizing the aliens with the plasma weapons." But there was a glimmer of amusement in her eyes. She addressed the High Commander again. A Federation diplomatic vessel will arrive within 6 standard hours to begin formal discussions. I suggest your Empire prepares its explanations carefully. As the Federation team began to withdraw, Reed noticed the guard who had helped him, Scar, standing slightly apart from the other Cathvar soldiers. On impulse, he paused. "Captain, one moment, please." Reed approached Scar, keeping his movement slow and non-threatening. "This guard provided assistance during my captivity. There may be elements within the Cathvar military who don't fully support their leadership's position." Torres assessed the guard with a calculating gaze. "Noted. That could be valuable information for our diplomatic team." Reed turned to Scar. "If you ever decide that your Empire's approach to interspecies relations isn't working for you, the Federation has protocols for asylum seekers. Just mention the talkative prisoner and you'll get a hearing." Scar's posture remained rigid, offering no visible response. But Reed thought he detected the slightest adjustment in the angle of its head, perhaps acknowledgement, perhaps consideration. As Reed turned to leave with the extraction team, Zalvrek suddenly spoke. "Human, your excessive vocalization. It was purposeful, a strategy." Reed paused at the threshold of the breached wall. "Everything humans do is purposeful. Commander, we're just not always obvious about our purposes. That's another inefficiency you might want to reconsider dismissing." The Federation team moved quickly through the Cathvar vessel's corridors, encountering no resistance. Other extraction teams had secured their route to the docking bay where their assault craft waited. As they boarded, Reed caught glimpses of the Federation vessels visible through the bay's atmospheric containment field. At least 6 ships, arrayed in a formation that allowed no escape for the Cathvar vessel. Once aboard the assault craft and safely away from the Cathvar ship, Torres removed her helmet and fixed Reed with an exasperated look. "You transmitted the emergency beacon by modulating your voice while rambling at your captors?" Reed grinned, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at his healing facial injuries. "It seemed like the appropriate application of my particular skill set." Torres shook her head. "Intelligence will want a complete debriefing. The information you extracted, particularly their intent toward human colonies, changes our strategic position significantly." "Happy to oblige," Reed replied, settling into a seat as medical personnel continued treating his injuries. "Though I should warn you, asking me for a complete account tends to result in extremely detailed responses. So I've heard." "Chatter," Torres said with a small smile. "In this case, I think your verbosity has earned you the right to be as thorough as you like." The assault craft docked with Torres's command vessel, and Reed was escorted to the medical bay for more comprehensive treatment. As predicted, representatives from 3 allied species waited to hear his account of the Cathvar interrogation, an Arcturian with its characteristic luminescent skin patterns, an Nator delegation with their ceremonial speech staffs, and somewhat surprisingly, a Volturian observer, its crystalline sensory apparatus glittering under the ship's lights. "Lieutenant Reed," the Arcturian greeted him, its voice a melodious cascade of tones. "Your transmission has caused considerable concern among the Alliance Council. The Cathvar Empire's stated intentions toward humanity appear to violate multiple provisions of the Proxima Accords." Reed nodded, accepting a nutrient drink from a medical technician. They seemed pretty committed to the idea that humanity is inefficient, disruptive, and needs to be regulated out of existence. Classic rationalization for genocide. Really, depersonalize the target species, emphasize resource competition, frame it as a logical necessity rather than a moral choice. The lead Entor tapped its speech staff once on the deck, producing a resonant tone that signified formal dialogue. This one asks, "Did you observe divisions within their command structure regarding this position?" Reed thought of Scar and the subtle assistance he had received. "Yes. At least one guard appeared to question the approach. Referenced a previous engagement where Cathvar commanders ignored Federation peace signals, resulting in unnecessary casualties. There may be internal factions less committed to conflict." The Volturian observer rotated its upper crystal array, a gesture equivalent to thoughtful consideration. "Significant. Cathvar social structures traditionally punish dissent severely. Evidence of internal questioning suggests ideological stress under pressure." Captain Torres, who had joined them after ensuring the ship was safely away from Cathvar space, activated a holographic display showing tactical information. "The diplomatic vessel Reason Discourse is already en route with representatives from all allied species. Based on Lieutenant Reed's intelligence, they're prepared to present a unified position. Any aggression against human colonies will be considered an attack on the entire alliance." The Arcturian skin patterns shifted to a configuration indicating approval. The Cathvar miscalculated. They assessed humanity in isolation rather than as part of our interconnected community. An error born of their hierarchical thinking. Reed couldn't help smiling. They definitely underestimated the human capacity for making friends, and for talking our way out of or into just about any situation. Over the next several days, as the diplomatic vessel arrived and formal discussions with the Cathvar Empire began, Reed found himself unexpectedly central to the proceedings. His detailed account of the interrogation, combined with the transmitted evidence of Cathvar intentions, had fundamentally altered the power dynamics of the negotiation. The Cathvar representatives, faced with united opposition from 4 spacefaring species and evidence of their own stated genocidal intent, were forced into a defensive position. Their initial demands for human withdrawal from disputed territories were replaced by reluctant acceptance of shared access and joint oversight committees. More surprising was the arrival of a Cathvar delegation led by a military officer whose scarification patterns marked them as a senior fleet commander. This officer requested a private audience with the Alliance representatives and Reed. "The actions of Interrogation Commander Zalvrek and High Commander Zev Tavik do not represent the unanimous position of the Imperial Military Council," the Cathvar officer stated once the private meeting began. "There are those among us who recognize that expansion through elimination is unsustainable in a sector with multiple advanced species." Reed studied the officer carefully. "You're suggesting there's a reform movement within the Empire? Suggesting such a thing would be treason," the officer replied carefully. "I am merely providing context for recent events and indicating that future interactions may not necessarily follow the pattern you experienced. Lieutenant Reed, the diplomatic implications were significant." The Alliance representatives exchanged meaningful glances, recognizing the veiled message. There were potential allies within the Cathvar power structure who might be cultivated over time. As the negotiations concluded with a tentative peace agreement, Reed found himself face-to-face with Commander Zalvrek one final time. The Cathvar officer had been assigned as a military liaison to the Joint Oversight Committee, effectively demoted for the security breach during Reed's interrogation. "Lieutenant Reed," Zalvrek acknowledged, its posture stiff and formal. The diplomatic corps believes we should clear the air between us before beginning committee work. Reed nodded. Seems reasonable. Though I'm curious, did they select you for this role as punishment, or because you're now the Kathvar with the most direct experience interacting with humans? Zalvrek's mandibles clicked once. Both assessments are accurate. My failure to properly contain your transmission is considered a significant security lapse. However, my first-hand knowledge of human psychological resilience is now deemed valuable. And what did you learn about humans during our time together? Reed couldn't resist asking. The Kathvar was silent for a moment. Compound eyes fixed on Reed in what might have been thoughtful consideration. That efficiency of communication and effectiveness of communication are not the same parameter, that what appears to be undisciplined vocalization may serve multiple simultaneous purposes, that underestimating an adaptation because it differs from one's own is a tactical error. Reed smiled. That's a pretty good start, for what it's worth. I learned something about Kathvar, too. You're not as monolithic as Federation intelligence reports suggested. You have internal diversity of thought, capacity for adaptation, and individuals willing to act on principle even against hierarchy. Such observations could be considered dangerously divisive if reported to imperial authorities. Zalvrek noted, though its tone carried no threat. Then it's fortunate that we're speaking privately, as fellow members of an oversight committee committed to peaceful cooperation. Reed replied smoothly. As the diplomatic missions prepared to depart, Captain Torres approached Reed with official orders. Headquarters has a new assignment for you, Lieutenant. Given your unique contribution to interspecies relations, you're being reassigned as a communication specialist attached to the Kathvar Liaison Office. Reed raised his eyebrows. They want to make the talkative prisoner the official voice of humanity to the species that just tried to erase us from the sector. Torres shrugged, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Apparently your particular brand of diplomatic verbosity made an impression. The Entor representative specifically requested you, something about your natural speech patterns demonstrating sacred cyclical dialogue forms without formal training. And the Kathvar, what do they think about this appointment? Officially, they've accepted it as part of the negotiated agreement. Unofficially, Torres glanced around before continuing in a lower voice. Intelligence suggests your guard friend, the one you called Scar, has been assigned to the Imperial delegation. Apparently, there's a growing faction within their military that's interested in learning more about human communication styles. Reed considered this information thoughtfully. So I went from annoying prisoner to unofficial cultural ambassador through the strategic application of not shutting up. There's a lesson in there somewhere. Just don't push your luck, Torres advised. The peace is fragile, and there are still plenty in the Kathvar hierarchy who share the High Commander's view of humanity. Understood. I'll restrict myself to talking only when necessary. At Torres's skeptical look, Reed grinned, which, of course, is almost all the time from a human perspective. As the Federation vessel prepared to depart with the diplomatic mission, Reed stood at a viewport, watching the Kathvar ships maintaining their distance, neither threatening nor friendly, but present in a way that acknowledged the new reality of their relationship. One of the Nator delegates approached, its speech staff making gentle tones as it moved. This one observes, you have demonstrated what our people call the victory of words over silence. It is considered one of the highest forms of peaceful resolution. Reed smiled. In human culture, we have many sayings about the power of communication. The pen is mightier than the sword. Talk it out, but my personal favorite might be most appropriate here. Keep talking until they understand. The Entor made a gesture of agreement. This one offers. Perhaps understanding begins when one cannot make the other be silent. As the ships separated and set course for their respective territories, Reed thought about that observation. The Kathvar had tried everything to silence him. Physical violence, neural technology, direct suppression of his speech. Yet in the end, It was his refusal to be silenced that had revealed their intentions, exposed their weaknesses, and ultimately led to a path forward that didn't end in conflict. The ship's communication system chimed, indicating an incoming transmission. To Reed's surprise, it was from the Cathvar vessel, specifically from Commander Zalvrek. "Lieutenant Reed," the commander's translated voice came through clearly. "Before our vessels separate, I am instructed to convey a message from the Imperial Diplomatic Corps." "I'm listening," Reed replied. Curious. There was a pause. Then, "The message is as follows. If one wishes to understand humans, one must permit them to speak." Reed smiled. "That's a good start, Commander. Tell them I look forward to our conversations." As the transmission ended and the ships continued on their separate paths, Reed reflected that perhaps the most human thing about him, his inability to stop talking even under duress, had turned out to be not a weakness but his greatest strength. In trying to silence him, the Cathvar had instead amplified his voice across the sector, transforming a simple cargo pilot into a catalyst for change. It was, he decided, a lesson worth sharing, preferably at length, with abundant contextual background, historical parallels, and philosophical implications. After all, why use 10 words when 1,000 would be so much more illuminating? Somewhere across the vast distance of space, he imagined Scar and others like him might be ready to listen.